Yeah, there should be a little countdown. There we go. Hey, SEO people, how's it going? That was a fantastic keynote by Phil earlier. I hope that everyone took away a lot from that. And now, as you know, the day is split into the various tracks, which you can see on the schedule. So if you're watching us now, then you're obviously on the search track, where we'll be delving into organic and paid search strategies with some of the best experts in the space. And these concepts that we're going to go through and the latest developments over at Google are going to help you generate more business via online search engines. So our first speaker today, which I'm very excited to talk to you, that I've already earmarked myself to kind of send his presentation over to people in my agency. This is our first speaker. He's called Nikolaj Mogensen, who heads up the award-winning SEO team at S360. And he's been working in SEO for the last 13 years. And in this talk, you're going to get the most up-to-date lecture on the present state of SEO strategies in light of all the algorithm updates over at Google during the past few years. So make sure you get this PDF afterwards, as this talk brings you one of the best SEO experts out there, giving you their latest understanding of the new reality of SEO that we live in as of today's date. So Nikolaj, over to you. We're all really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Larry. What an intro. I like that. All right, so let me quickly just share my screen to begin with. So basically, what I'll be spending the next 43 minutes talking about is SEO and what happens and what is happening around SEO in 2022, especially on the back of all the updates that has been there for the last couple of years, but also that we see coming. So let's jump into it, and please ask questions in the chat. I'm more than happy to answer anything. So let's go. So first off, if you take a look back over the last 3-4 years, there's been quite a lot of different updates from Google. Back in 2018, we saw the mobile first indexing, also in popular called the mobile get-in. So that basically made a huge shift towards mobile-friendly websites and had a really big impact of how we approach SEO from that angle. Then in 2019, something really interesting happened. So Google launched what they call BERT. And BERT was the first sort of AI that Google integrated into the algo, where they were starting to predict the intentions behind keywords, starting to predict what people would be looking for, and incorporate that into the algorithm. Now, along the way, there's been a range of broad core updates. They are typically there 2 or 3 times a year, evolving, where they sort of shift around in the main algorithm. So we typically see them, and they give a big bounce in the search results for many pages. And I'll go back to what actually happens during these different updates. Last year, we saw, from my point of view, 2 really interesting updates. The first were the link spam updates. There were 3 of those. And I think they're rather unrecognized by a lot of SEOs. What happened was that Google went out and said, now we're getting more sophisticated identifying spammy links. So obviously, when you think about it and the way Google presented, it's not sort of the same thing as back with the Penguin update. It's a bit different, but let me get back to that. But it changes the way we do SEO. And then also there were the Corporate Vitals update back in the summer last year. And basically what Google said was that now we're going to, because page speed has been part of the algorithm for a long time, but Google went out and said now it's these 3 parameters that you should be looking at when optimizing for page speed. And that's the Corporate Vitals. So super interesting, and really gives us SEOs much more clear picture of what we should be optimizing towards when it comes to page speed. Now, also last year, Google announced that they are going to launch what they call MOM update. And basically, Mom update is sort of, you can sort of say it's adding on to BERT. So what will happen is that Google will introduce a lot more AI towards mapping intention, mapping content, and sort of mixing and matching content together with intents. So that's really interesting. Let's get back to that update. It's not live yet. We don't know when it's going live. Presumably earliest, latest 2022, but I think it's going to be later, especially for smaller markets at least. So if you take a look at the core updates, basically what the core update does is that it removes content that are not of high quality, or gets content back if you sort of rebounds on your core update penalty if you have one. So basically, the way Google does this is that it wants to give a more genuinely correct answer to questions and to keywords. So it tries to address especially the EAT factors of a website. They use different factors as proxies to estimate how much expertise. So EAT is expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So how much expertise does a website give the reader? How much authority has it, and what is the trustworthiness of that website? So the proxies Google can really use here is stuff like, do you have your address, your company address on a given page? Do you have your VAT number? Do you have your phone number, and so on? So really try to make your website extremely transparent around these things is something that Google looks at when it comes to the core updates. Then you actually want to have an about us page that gives a real picture of who your company is and what the company behind the website is. So the worst thing you can do is adopt a stock photo on your about us page, write pretty much nothing, don't have a phone number, an address, or anything on the about us page. You want to avoid that, and then instead, have real photos, have real descriptions, have a real storyline, and so on, because that emphasizes that you are a real company, which is one of the things that the core update is looking for. Then Google also looks at a company's general reputation. So it looks at your reviews at sort of review platforms. So that is something that haven't had any influence in the past whatsoever, but it's starting to get more influence as Google wants to serve well-performing companies in general. And Google then looks at other signals like, can we mention that we've been, or can we say on our website that we've been mentioning in these newspapers and so on, stuff that gives security for visitors when they see your website. And finally, can you put an author behind your content? And if yes, is there an author page? And is there a description on that author page? And does that author page has links and so on? So Google really tries to estimate, is the real expert behind this content? And if not, if especially if the keyword is within more sensitive topics like health oriented topics, then Google would what we see in the search result is that Google tries to remove content it doesn't want to show. Then we have the spam updates, and basically what Google does is that it nullifies links, and from that it does rearrange the positions to provide a better result. That basically means back, if some of you can remember the Penguin updates, basically what the Penguin update was, that it penalized websites that were involved in buying links, basically, right? Buying spammy links. So you would have a penalty, and that penalty could look very different. It could be a -10 position penalty, -50. It could be a site-wide penalty or manual penalty. But now what Google basically does is that it doesn't want to give any penalties anymore, so it just nullifies bad links. And it's quite traditional how Google is looking at these links. It would look at, so the link you're getting, is that coming from websites with a lot of other commercial links? And is those links coming from low quality websites, or is there very low relevance from the websites or pages you're getting links from? So it's sort of classic penguin spam signals, like what is the IP range of the pages you're getting links from? What is the neighborhood? Are you getting links from pages that are also linking to casino or worse, porn? So stuff like that you want to avoid. Or I mean, now that Google just nullifies them, you not necessarily want to avoid them. You just don't want to pay for stuff like that anymore. Um, and also paid links without a well sponsored attached to the tag. So that's the spam update. And then we have the core vitals update. Basically, what Google is doing here is that it's using new signals, or they've been using this for years. Now we just know exactly what signals they're using. So they're using the core vitals updates to rearrange the search results. And basically, the three things they're looking at is the LCP, so largest contentful paint, and there you want to be within 2.5 seconds. There's numerous tools of that where you can test it, or you can just jump into Search Console to see your actual score. It looks at the FID, so and the CLS. Right. So these things are fairly easy to analyze and fairly easy to give tickets to a technical team and try to improve. And what's important here is that Google rearrange over time. So when this update will launch, you wouldn't, and we didn't see sudden drops for any of our clients at least. It takes time. Also, when you then improve your scores, it's not like you're just jumping up 10 positions. So it is over time you'd see the impact on this update. And then finally, you have the mom update, and there's a lot of things happening here, and we don't know exactly what's actually going to happen. But this is what I suggest, right? So there's two things going on. One, just normally rearranging content so it gets better at understanding quality behind content. And then the other one is adding new content to the results. So rather than only just relying on what is the actual words being used on a page, it understands what is the intent behind the query and then what is the answer and the intent behind the content. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that what Google says is that it will now, if you're sitting in Lithuania or if you're sitting in Sweden, it will serve content in other languages to that local search. So I could be sitting in Sweden or in Denmark, and then I could be served Japanese content or German content, and then Google would just use Translate to give me that content. So because the translation engine is getting so much better, Google will start using that to present content in other languages, but in your own local language. And basically, what Google said is that it's an AI. It's 1,000 times more powerful than BERT, and there was a lot of changes in the search results back when BERT came around. So I really expect this to be a big thing when Google launches it. And then the second thing is that it's multimodal, meaning that it looks at images and looks at what's actually on the image. So um, I mean, right now we can add the LT tag to images and we can add file names, but in the future, Google will actually look at the images and say what's on it. And is it a good image? Is it a stock photo? Is it, or is it our unique image? And is it relevant to that, what we want that page to rank for? They also said that they will do the same thing with videos. So, meaning that videos, it will read videos, it will transcribe them, and it will understand what's in the video. And then that will become a ranking factor as well. So obviously that has a huge impact on how we address SEO in general. Right, and then there's the language thing as well. Right. Then I wanted to share a couple of other things. What has happened over the last 12 months, at least in smaller markets, is that the first number here is the amount of search queries in that market, well, in general, where people also ask is sort of showing up. And the green one is the increase from 12 months ago. So what you can see here is that Google incorporated people also ask en masse. for a lot of searches. And you've probably seen that when you do a search for one of your key phrases, that people also ask, it shows up, right? And you also have a lot more featured snippets coming in. You have a lot more rank 0 coming in. And that basically means that if on many of your searches, you also see local pack taking up a lot of space, right? So what we see is that in general, our click-through rates are declining because Google is stuffing the search results with all kinds of different things, local pack, featured snippets. People also ask videos and so on, carousels, and that gives opportunities, obviously, but it also poses challenges because we need to have better positions. So what does these things mean for our SEO strategies? So let's start with the first point, right? I have 11 points. The first one is that in general, we see that the competition is increasing. So this is basically a correlation study, old one. From what we can see is that the better the position, the more content you have on your page. So there's a clear correlation between the amount of content and your position. And what we see and expect to see in the future as well is that the amount of content that you need to rank really well is going to increase. So across the board, if we have key sort of keywords we want to rank for, intents we want to rank for, we need to produce more content, and obviously that we have to make bigger investments into content. And then also not only the actual content length of the word count, we also need to think about relevant images, not only being stock photos. So how can we in the future produce content that are not just text? And then the quality of the content, it grows. The sort of the demand for writing real content that people will engage with and use is also increasing. And finally, videos will become increasingly important. Maybe not during the next 12 months, but after that. So I think these things are extremely interesting in terms of your SEO strategy, depending obviously how you do it today. But what we see is that we invest heavily into fewer pieces, and then we invest more into those pieces because the competition is really tough. So rather than maybe building 400-word articles, we really try to create fewer but better articles of maybe 1,200 words. Right, so number 2 is what I would recommend is spend more time on keyword research and move into value-based metrics rather than the traditional SEO metrics. Right? So you can sort of say that when you're investing in content to gain organic visibility, you have a diminishing return on those pieces. And obviously you want to avoid starting to create content up here, and you want to start creating content down here instead. And keyword research is sort of the backbone of that work, right? So you really need to spend time analyzing what is the current content we have, and what's the content we want to optimize, and what's the content we're missing. And then move into value-based metrics rather than normally what I see SEOs do is that they just look at search volumes. And search volumes is good. It's a good metric to look at in terms of deciding what pieces to create. But when you add value-based metrics to it, you get a whole different picture. Now, this is an example, a thought example though, where you see, okay, we have the red ones are new pages we want to create. The orange ones are pages we have already that we want to optimize. And green ones is the ones we've done. And this was before we added value base. So we would take a page like this because there's a potential of creating 1,900 extra visits. But when you incorporate the value from your Google Ads and the value from your Google Analytics on that specific landing page, then you see that it's only around $1.5, while this page up here has way less potential in terms of organic traffic. But when people are searching this, it has a huge value for us as a business. So when you incorporate that into your content mapping, you get a totally different picture of why and which pieces you should create. And also, obviously, when you have a potential revenue number to pay this, you can then decide how much do I want to invest into that piece. So that means that you can adopt a tiered approach to content creation, right? So when you have your diminishing return, you can then basically add different tiers to your content strategy, right? So when you have your content map and you map content pages towards keywords, you can then say, okay, this is a tier one article or category PLP page, or this is a tier two, this is tier three, and then your strategy becomes much more granular, and you can invest, because investing in content and SEO is getting more heavy, so you can invest in the right pieces with the amount of time and money, because it's expensive, right? Expensive to write good content, expensive to get real images and create videos and stuff like that. So this is an example. For tier one, you might have 30 pages only, where you want to create 1,600 words, have 2 or 3 unique images, even create a video. Right. Then another impact from these updates is to not only optimize towards one keyword, but optimize around that keyword. So basically, if you have a page, you would normally have one primary keyword, and then you try to optimize towards that within your content. So add that an X amount of time, trying to really optimize it. Also, the secondary keywords, right? So if you're trying to rank for shoes, you also want to rank for the secondary keyword, which might be cheap shoes or designer shoes or whatever, and the tertiary keywords as well. But then what you want to add here is that you also want to optimize for synonyms to that given word, so that you cover all the way around that word. And you also want to optimize for related words and phrases. So when you write about something, people would expect you would also be writing something about something else. So adding those things in is getting increasingly important. And you can use two tools for this. So my favorite tool in terms of this is Surf SEO. And this is just a small phrase or how it looks. So you would have your piece, and then you would add that into a Surfer tool, and then you get sort of a score of how well is this content optimized when compared to competitors. And also, what are the words you're using that competitors are also using, and how many times are they using those words? But also, more importantly, the related words and the synonyms, are competitors using those words? And then you can increase the quality of your content significantly by adopting tools like these to understand what should I write about when I write about a given piece. So strong recommendation to do that. Um, and also try to optimize towards intent rather than the actual keyword. So when you have a keyword, it could be sleep, right? Then around that, there's a lot of intents or a lot of keywords related to that you would see from Surfer Tool or whatever. And what's important here is that you're not optimizing towards the keyword sleep. You're optimizing towards an intent, that is how to overcome sleep problems and disorders and get a good night's healthy sleep. That's the intent you want to sort of target. And really try to think about what is people actually looking for when they're searching this keyword. And you have plenty of tools at your hand to understand that. Um, and also not only intent, but build topic clusters around that intent, right? So if you have highly competitive keywords like sleep, you want to add pages around that can supplement your main page, link to it, add your topical relevance around the topic, so that you have a hero page or topic cluster where selling about sleep, where you have a long page, and then around that you have something around sleep calculators, sleep meditation, walking, hiking, whatever. So you can sort of build up your authority within that space, and then link into the main article or category, whatever it is. So that's something that we see extremely good results from, building these really authoritative pages as part of the strategy. And point number 7 is optimize your content towards rank 0. And basically, what that means is that by adding all kinds of different things to an article, you can make it easier for Google to give you a featured snippet. So that is understanding the target keywords you want to get a rank 0 for, and make sure there's a paragraph where you use the keyword twice, because that increases the chances of getting a rank 0. Make sure that your content is clean and consistent in terms of HTML. Make sure that the relevance of that content, that you have bits and pieces in on the page that is easily sort of extractable so that it can be on its own. Make sure you at least have 2 paragraphs that Google can use on its own in the SERP. Um, Make sure you include clear H2 and H3 tags on your headings. Make sure you are having featured snippet to your HTML blog post, as an example. And keep paragraphs below 50 words, because Google has a limit on what they would put into rank 0. So have at least 2 paragraphs that are 50 words that can go into the rank 0, increases the chance. And then when you have list, make sure you use HTML to show that list with the li tag. Right, then build content towards people also ask. Okay, so basically when you have a keyword like sleep, you see there's a big box here saying people also ask. And actually, if you just go back, if you're not ranking number 1 for sleep, you're not above the fold, right? You have people also ask, you have find results on something else, and then you have the local pack, in this case in Copenhagen, because that's where I sit, right? So the click-through rate is decreasing. So makes sense to also optimize towards the people who also ask, right? And basically, the way Google do this is that they choose a sort of question based on the actual search behavior. And what you can see is that the page that ranks then for that question is either position 1 or position 0 for that specific keyword. And actually here you can see what can lack of sleep do to the body, but the stuff ranking, it's not the article, what happens when you don't get enough sleep. So it's fairly easy for you to go in and win a position 1 on a keyword like that, where the other articles is not as relevant, or it's not the same, right? So go in and look at the questions being asked and then build content toward that. So that looks like this, right? So when you have your topic cluster, not only building supporting pages that can rank for something else, you also want to build the questions that people are asking around sleep, and then build smaller pieces that can then jump into that area as well. That basically means that when you have your content mapping, and that's also one of the reasons why keyword research is getting so important, right? So that in your content map, you can then, when you sort of arrange that, you arrange your pillar pages, your subtopic pages, but you also add in your questions. And then that might be short, sort of 200 word or 300 word articles. And then the pillar page might be 1,600 word, because that's a highly competitive keyword or intent, right? Then number 9, fight title and meta rewrites. So what we've seen over the last year is that Google is increasing the amount of title and meta it's rewriting. And the way you can fight it is by obviously convey to the length metrics you should be below. Not using the same keyword twice. So typically Google would go ahead and remove one of those. Not use sort of separators in the same way as we've used to do, like dashes or pipes. Google would typically remove those or rewrite those. So dash is getting in the SERP a lot more than pipe, but that's definitely one way to do it as well. So what you could do is, have a question mark, keyword question mark, and then add your USPs afterwards. But also brackets, parentheses, and caps lock. Right? So if you have a brand in caps lock, that's not a good idea, because Google will rewrite it. Right? Number 10, change your authority building game. Right? So go from the old school, low quality private block networks or expired domains, or clear link farms, directories, commenting spam, exchange links with other websites, more from that into things that in the next 3 years you'll get value from, right? So it can be paid, like high quality advertorials, where you add real value to a real article on a real website with readers. Do that, and then think about this, right? So you should, when you publish this, you should be able in 3 years' time to look back at that article and say, "Oh, wow, that's a good article." You should be able to show it to your boss and say, "We have this article. What do you think?" And if you can't do that, probably it's not what you should be doing. Um, and then also organic stuff like publishing press releases, finding stories in your companies, and do outreach to journalists, or create linkable assets, content that other websites wants to link to. It's typically evolving around data, studies, stuff like that, where there is some genuinely unique content that people would like to link to. It's very rarely that people just links to an article unless it's really good. And then do outreach campaigns on top of that, so that you try to reach out to the target group in which you want to get links from. And finally, you can also do influencers and blog campaigns, paying them or giving them products, and then just not interfering with what they're writing. That is the tactics you want to morph into. So if you're still in the red ones, now is definitely the time. And you might not notice that the stuff you've been doing for the last 3 years is getting nullified, because maybe some of those links still works, and it does in many markets. But then you might buy 5 links a month, and then 2 of them is getting nullified, 3 of them is getting nullified, but you still have 3 links, but you don't know which ones. But you're paying for them, so it's a waste of money. So from my point of view, you definitely need to morph over to the more clean and true strategies here, if you haven't done it already. And then point number 11, adopt seasonality into your strategy, right? So basically, when you see, I don't know, there was an extra slide there. When you see dates coming into the search result, typically that's because freshness and seasonality means something for the algorithm. If there's no dates in there, so if all is just regular search results, then it doesn't matter when the content was published. But when you start seeing dates, you want to republish content now and then to make it stay fresh, and add a couple of new paragraphs, and then we publish it. And what it does is that it gives a higher click-through rate if the content is recent. And it also gives you better rankings, because Google acknowledges that this is more recent, so I want to give you better rankings. And it's extremely sort of different from intent and keyword to keyword, how important freshness is. But you need to understand, is there a factor here? One of the things you can do is that, or basically, there's 3 different types of keyword. There's the evergreen, where you won't see dates in there. Then there's the seasonal, where you see some dates, typically, where you have 1 season or 2 seasons during the year. Could be fitness or meal boxes, as an example. Right there, you would see a season in January and August for some reason, and then in those 2 seasons, you can make your content slightly more seasonal, or grass in this example, right? Then you have current, could be Vuelta, right? The cycling championship, where it is only once a year, and it's very sort of dense in the search behavior around that event. And they're sort of when content is published is extremely important, right? So if you're trying to rank for events, you want to make sure that content is being published regularly around that event. So because often you would also see news carousels coming up on those events. What you can do is that when you have a content map, now revolving a lot around the content map, because that's really the backbone of when we do client sort of work for our clients, that's building these content maps. What you can do is that you can inject seasonality in it. So all of the things I've talked about before, you can also have like graphs on the seasonality on the given pages. Actually, it's coming from the given keyword, and then you just morph up those numbers, and then you have a seasonality on each piece, and then you know when is the peak, and then when do we then want to produce it, right? So we want to produce it a couple of months before that peak, so that we can get it properly indexed, and we can win a proper ranking before the search behavior peaks. Right. So what actually changed here, right? Now I gave you 11 different tips and on the back of the actual changes we see in the algorithm. But what is actually changing? It's not that much, right? I've been using this slide for, I think, 10 years. The only difference is that user behavior is coming into play or came into play 6 years ago. Other than that, it's the same sort of handles we have to pull when we want more organic traffic. Right? We can work with content. Now, the content game is obviously changing, but we can work with it, right? We can add new pieces, we can optimize existing pages, we can add content to category pages, to product pages, to our landing page, service pages. We can add our blog net universe and inspirational universe to attract people early in the funnel. So we can optimize our titles, headings, our LT tags, our content, and here content length means something. It's the same thing as you'd be doing 10, 12 years ago. And then you have the authority. That's still the same, right? Google still follows links. It still evaluates authority based on links and PageRank. And not only external links, but also internally. So the way we sort of spread out our authority across the website, it's still the same thing. So it'd still be analyzing internal link flows, right? Simulate PageRank flows on a given website, and then do changes to internal links based on that. It's the same thing. And user behavior, you still want to optimize USPs and call to actions on titles and metas. You still want to try to optimize for structured data so you get more snippets. So you get the FAQ snippet out there. You still want to get people to click your result. And finally, the technical part, right? You still want to make a fast website. You still want to make it indexable for Google. You don't want to hide content, stuff like that. These are all the same. But what has changed from an SEO point of view, apart from those 11 points, is that the way we spend our time as SEOs is changing rapidly, because the tools at hand is getting way better, and the way Google sees things is also getting way better. So back years ago, as an SEO, you would spend a lot of time doing manual work, trying to stitch together sheets, try to collect data, try to make manual searches, try to tinker around. But now you have a lot of great tools at hand, so you can spend more time on building the strategy. You have more data available through SEMrush or Ahrefs or whatever tool you're using. It's the data, and the amount of data you have at hand is just way bigger, and it's growing. So the conclusions you can make is it has to be more strategic, right? So you're sort of changing the way you and as an SEO work from more old school tagging keywords. I don't know. I mean, I've been doing so much tagging of keywords, trying to understand what's the categories, what's the intentions behind this set of keywords, and then to having way better AI tools to actually categorize my keywords faster, spending way less time doing these things. So I think that's the big things that is changing from an SEO point of view, right? There is coming in the mom update. I really expect a lot from that in terms of how good Google is at understanding intents and match that to content. But it will be the same things we're doing, right? Maybe it will have a bit more sort of focus on sort of the content strategies, but it's still the same things. Right? So that's actually wraps up my my talk here. So I hope that you have some questions. At least maybe you, Larry, can come up with a couple of questions. But otherwise, you're welcome to ask them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nikolaj, for that amazing talk and for sharing all of your insights with us. And yes, so anyone who's in the chat right now, be great if you pop in some Q&A questions, and don't feel shy at all if there's any specific questions that you're encountering at work that touch on some of the things that Nikolaj's been saying that have been been stuck. That's what this session is for. There's no worries. Just put in anything that makes that will help you. And so we've got George who's come in with a question for you, Nikolaj, and it's actually a really interesting one that I've heard from other people in agency world, and he wants to know what effect will the new GDPR policies, which is basically has forced Google to launch their GA4, which we actually had a good session on yesterday about as well. What effect do you see that happening on your side?
In terms of SEO?
Yes, in terms of SEO, yeah.
Right. So in terms of SEO, it doesn't have any impact whatsoever. Right. So I mean, Google is doing the same thing. So it's more. So typically, when looking at SEO data, you would be looking into Search Console, and that has nothing to do with tracking and cookies and stuff. But obviously, you want to report on things, so you want to have a proper analytics setup, and of course, you want to morph into Google Analytics 4, and you want to add the consent mode in there, and have proper tracking. So definitely recommend that, because you want business metrics into your analytics, and you also want to export that into your data sheets when it comes to SEO. But sort of from a ranking perspective, it has no impact whatsoever. So it's perfect. I mean, to be honest, I don't spend more time thinking about it,
That's
which is good.
why
Yeah,
I think, yeah, I think that'll be
I
a
can.
relief for people
Yeah,
to,
it's a relief
to
for
know.
me.
That would be, yeah, I'm sure that would be a big relief. Now, in terms of your session that you've been through there, what would you say for people that are in the SEO space? Like, what would you say is the top two things you future? So, with your kind of forecasting hat on, what do
Hmm.
you see, or noises have you heard from Google that you think will have the biggest effect on SEO? People that they need to really look out for and get on top of now.
I think where we see sort of the competitive advantage right now for clients is that the amount of data we're using in the content maps is just way better than I see anywhere else. So I think upping that game, and then looking into tools within content creation, so like AI tools, looking at those scraper tools that gives you way better data to drive decisions on building content. I think those are two things. Um, yeah.
Great. We've got a question from Cillian. Uh, Sorry, when people add questions. Yeah, from Cillian Miladinov, and he's asking, how do you make an SEO strategy for specific industries that have low numbers of searches and actual keywords in the tools? I
Yeah.
believe listening to customers is vital, but are there any other tips you want to share
Yeah.
in that case? Yeah.
I mean, if you're a B2B company, as an example, I mean, a 10 monthly searches can be extremely valuable, right? So I work with a GPS company that tracks construction equipment, right? So fleet management. And the volumes are, I mean, in US, if a keyword has 100 searches, it's huge for us, right? So I think that
Yeah.
typically you would just say, oh, when you look at B2C, right, you'd be looking at high volumes. But uh, you have to look less at the volume game here, and then adopt Search Console data way more, because you get way more precise data. You get below 10 impressions as well. So those two things, and then you have to go a lot more with your gut feeling and your analysis of what is the problem that my client's having, and then just sometimes, even though you can't find any searches for it, build that content, because you believe that if people were searching for this, and we think they are, because we as you say, you talk with your customer service and stuff like that, then you just, you don't have to have the data to back it up. Sometimes you just need to do the things you feel right, and then
Yeah.
just add that piece to the content strategy, right? So,
Yeah.
and then when you are in a space, and that happens a lot in B2B as well, where you are in a space where keywords overlap with B2C, and then it just floods the volumes, and you have no idea,
Yeah.
is this real searches for me or not. Then you have to really you have to really look away from those keywords that B2C is doing, and then because you can get sort of blindsided by that, and then
Hmm.
keep focusing on those keywords and those intents that has low volumes. But when people are searching for this, it's a relevant potential customer for me. So I
Yeah.
think that's those are the 2 points I want to give to that.
And
I
what
hope
would
that
you
makes
say
sense.
about, say, if you're, let's say, building a startup or a tech solution that's
Yeah.
kind of displacing an analog industry? So let's say there's people who are used to searching for a specific type of company, but actually
Hmm.
you're coming in with something that would compete with that service, but there's no search volume for the specific way you're doing things. Would you suggest building a lot of kind of comparison content and trying to hijack some
Yeah, you could do that. I
keywords?
mean,
Yeah, yeah,
so SEO, it's you can't really win something if there's no demand, right? So, and
yeah,
that's also cool, right? So then you just have to do something else than SEO. But I would say, if you come in with a new product where there's no demand for that specific thing because it's a new thing. Looking at competitors and driving and building content towards that as an alternative is definitely because there people are searching, especially when in the SaaS industry, right? People are searching for alternatives to things, right? So
Yeah,
alternative content mix. And then you might want to then morph into the more upper funnel content where people would be searching for a symptom or problem of some sort. They have
yeah.
no idea about the answer, and then you might be part of that. So then you can build content up there instead.
Gotcha. Well, Stillian, I hope that answered your question. And so for now, we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much again. I hope everyone can join me in thanking Nikolaj. And if you grab his PDF after this, you've also got contact details in there to get in touch with him. You can also get in touch with him through the Pine tool. So if you have any other questions, do follow up. I'm sure he'd be happy to kind of help while he's at the conference.
Yep.
And yes, I think right now the plan is there's going to be a 15-minute break, and then we'll see you again for more stuff.